pattern, so I thought that I should jump right back into it, and I asked you guys to vote for what pattern you would like next over on @sewing_in_May. That is my new Instagram account for everything sewing related, all of the tips and tricks, and when I will be announcing my next sewing tutorials and everything. So I did a poll up on there on what you guys wanted me to release next, and you guys all voted for the Madison dress. This is the Madison dress, and I'll put some photos and videos up here of what it looks like on. This was a dress that I released back in 2022, I believe, and I absolutely love it. It is a go-to during the summer and springtime when I'm heading to the beach or just on an everyday basis. It's also a really cute everyday dress or a date night dress, and I just absolutely love it. I designed this piece when I was changing my brand over to be a bit more size inclusive, and I wanted to create a mini dress that was nice and flowy and easily adjustable and suitable to multiple different body types, and something that I have started to feature a lot in my brand since 21-22 was adjustable straps and adjustable bust straps, and this dress was just one of those pieces that really worked well with those features. So as you can see, the Madison dress actually has these adjustable tie straps on your shoulder here and also at the bust. So there's no elastic in this at all. This is all adjustable by just this front bust strap. You can just move it along like that, move the ruffles as much as you like and make it more or less gathered and suit it to your body type. So the story behind the name of the dress, this is actually the first piece that I named after a friend of mine. So Madison, or Maddie, I used to be her neighbour at Yamundi markets. She used to sell her artwork, and I obviously sold in May pieces at Yamundi markets, and over the years we became good friends. And there was one day where I was like, I need a model, and I wanted to know if she would like to do it and if she had any friends that could do it. So her and her friend Ellie came and helped me on the photo shoot, and they just did an amazing job, and I was really grateful to have both of them there. And I needed to name the dress something. I didn't have a name for it yet, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna call it the Madison dress because she wore it and she helped me on the day, and I'm just really grateful for that. So that's the story behind it. So I thought that we should jump in and get making the Madison dress. To start, you'll need to print out your patterns and assemble them by following the instructions on the printout and cut out your size. On the dress panel piece, you'll notice that there is a lip or a curve at the bottom. This is for the back of the dress, and the straight line is for the front. When you're cutting this out on your fabric, fold up the lip or the curve along the straight line so that you can cut out the front, and then fold it back down so that you can cut out the back. This just adds a little bit of extra coverage for the fabric at the back of the dress, and this is also how you can tell which is the front and which is the back piece. I'm using a cotton/linen blended fabric for this dress, and I recommend to stick to a light to medium weight woven fabric like linen, cotton, or even rayon. Just something that has a nice drape to it and isn't too heavy. Cut your patterns out by following the cutting guides on the pattern, and remember to mark your notches as well. We will be using bias tape for this dress as well, but I will come back to that in a little bit. Once you've cut everything out, the first step is to take the front top panel piece and overlock or zigzag stitch the front to prep it for the hem. This is the shorter side and the one without the notch. Once you've overlocked those edges, lay them flat together with the good sides facing, and we'll now join them at the front. Make sure that the pieces have the straight bottom edge aligned and the top edge aligned. You'll notice that the top comes down slightly on an angle. Measure 5 to 6 centimeters up on that front part where we've overlocked and pin the front overlocked sides together. This will join the pieces together and allow for an opening, but if you want more coverage, you can also measure up to 7 or 8 centimeters. Take this to your sewing machine and sew the 5 centimeters parallel to the overlocked edge with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Head to your iron and you'll need to press flat the overlocked edges to either side of where we sewed and along the overlocked edges to create our hem. As you can see, this is now the front piece and you'll have this opening. I recommend to keep it around the 5 to 6 centimeter mark, but again, if you want a little bit more coverage at the front, you can sew up to 7 or 8 centimeters. Take this to your sewing machine once done and sew your hems on either side by sewing a straight stitch from top to bottom. And this is what it should look like. Next, we'll attach the back to the front, so lay the front piece flat with the good side up and then lay the back piece on top with the good sides facing each other. Pin down either side where the notches are and you can then sew a straight stitch down the side seams, followed by overlocking or zigzag stitching these to secure the raw edges. We'll move on to the dress panel now and do the exact same thing. Lay the front down with the good sides facing up and then put the back down with the good side facing the good side of the front piece. Then pin down either side and sew a straight stitch down each edge, followed by overlocking or zigzag stitching to hide the raw edges. So I'm going to go back and create our bias tape now before the next step, and you can either cut out strips of bias that equal the length required for your size given in the instruction booklet and join them together, or you can follow my method to create a continuous bias tape that you can use on multiple projects. I measured out a 20 by 20 inch square. You can make this a lot smaller if you're only using this for one dress, so around 12 to 14 inches depending on what you would like and how much you would like to keep. But I use this for other straps, so that's why I've used a bigger square. Cut the square out and then cut diagonally from one corner to the other to create two large triangles. And then with one of those triangles, you'll need to flip it over as shown in the video and pin it in place. Then we'll go to our sewing machine and sew along this edge. Now that you've sewed that edge, take either tailor's chalk or an air erasable fabric pen, and we're going to mark lines parallel to the longest edges. You'll need to measure 1.75 inches in width using either a ruler or a small measuring device like mine, and mark with the pen on the wrong side of the fabric. Go along and continue to mark up from the edge 1.75 inches and create a line. Then from that line you drew, measure and mark another 1.75 inches and continue to do this until you get to the top of the fabric, and you'll see that you now have lines going all the way up. These will just help you when you're cutting out your bias tape to make sure that it's all the same width all the way along. Mine's already started to fade, so it's a bit hard to see, but this is what it should look like. And then what you'll do is flip it over so the good side is facing you and just fold the edges back over onto themselves as shown, and you can see that the lines should align with each other. You'll then need to offset the lines by 1 to make it continuous. So pull the edges out slightly and then pin this in place, and then you can sew a straight stitch along this edge. You'll get this sort of tube shape now, and what you can do is take your scissors and cut along those straight lines that you drew before, and you'll notice that as you're doing this, you'll just start to get this continuous strip. Continue cutting along the lines until you get to the end, and you'll now have your bias tape. Cut off any excess fabric, like any parts that are at the seams where they hang over, and then you can go to your iron. Fold over one side into the center and press it, and continue to do this along that edge. Then fold over the other side into the center and again press it along that edge, and continue this all the way along until you get to the end of the strip. This is all that you'll need to do for the purpose of this dress, but when you make bias tape normally, you will also need to fold it again in half to hide those raw edges completely, but just for this dress, we only need to do those 2 folded edges. While we're at the iron, we're also going to press down the side seams of the top panel and the dress panel just so they sit nice and flat. Now go back to the sewing machine and take the bias tape, and on one end you'll need to fold over the edge 1 centimeter to create a hem. Sew this down with a straight stitch, and then we can begin pinning the bias tape to the top panel. Find the opening and pin the good side of the bias tape to the good side of the top panel and continue to pin all the way around until you get to the other side. Once you get to the other side, you can align the bias tape up with the front opening and work out how much you need to cut off by aligning it up and cutting off about 1 centimeter over the edge, and then fold this 1 centimeter bit over to create the hem for the opposite side. Sew this down to create the hem for that side. Just make sure that you don't sew it to the front of the fabric piece yet. Now you can finish pinning the rest of the bias tape to the front, and then you can sew the bias tape to the front of the dress, starting from the front opening and going along the edge all the way to the other side. I like to sew along the crease of the bias tape, which should be about 1 centimeter. This is optional because it will be hidden, but I then go to my overlocker and overlock the raw edges where we just sewed to help hold all that fabric together. I then also overlock the other length of the bias tape to hold all of those raw edges together, because this will be up against the bust strap and I just don't want any of the loose threads coming out when we're adjusting it. Now that I've done that, I like to secure the seam of the bias tape and the front top panel together to hide the overlocked edge and to just make it sit nice and clean by pushing all the threads between the seam and the front, and then press the seam to the front panel and then sew about 2 centimeters parallel to that edge. This just holds that sort of flap that was created from those parts down, and also stops the thread from coming undone. Do this for both sides, and then for the other side of the bias tape with that overlocked thread, take a large sewing needle and thread it through the overlocked threads on the tape, and then you can take the excess thread and put it through the needle and then pull it through the overlocked thread. This hides all the thread inside of itself and stops everything coming undone. Next, go to the iron and press your bias tape seam over to the inside of the top panel so that it will sit nice and flat. With the other side of the bias tape, we're going to fold over that overlocked edge to the inside to hide it. This should be easy because that side should already have a crease in it from earlier. So just fold that underneath to hide the overlock in between the bias and the top, pin in place all the way along, and then we can sew a straight stitch along this edge starting from the opening and going all the way around. Try to sew as close to the edge as possible. This will just allow for more room when you pull the bust strap through. We'll then make the ruffle bit at the top, and you can either measure down about 0.5 centimeters from the top and mark a line with your air erasable pen or tailor's chalk and go all the way along the top, or you can just do what I do and sew a 0.5 centimeter seam allowance straight stitch all the way along that top edge. This just creates your ruffle on the top and makes the casing nice and tight for the bust strap. You'll need to make sure that you have at least 0.9 centimeters of allowance in that stitch between the bottom of the ruffle and the bottom of the bias strap, so that you have that nice little bit of casing to put your bust strap through. Hopefully that makes sense, but you just need to have enough space between the two stitches so that you can thread your bust strap. Next, we'll make our shoulder strap. So take one of the shoulder straps and fold it in half lengthways, pin down and sew a straight stitch down that edge, and then repeat it for all 4 straps. Then you can head to your overlocker and overlock those raw edges. While I'm at the overlocker, I'm also going to fold my bust strap in half lengthways and overlock this edge, then flip it inside out with a loop turner. If you don't have an overlocker, you can fold it in half and sew a straight stitch down the edge with a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and then cut off some of the excess fabric and then invert it with a loop turner. I'm also going to flip my straps inside out with the loop turner after this. I'm going to iron all of my straps so that they are flat, and with the shoulder straps, I'm going to make sure that the seam sits on one side of the strap as well. Going back to our sewing machine now, we will close up the ends of the shoulder straps. What I do is I take my loop turner and I pull one of the openings back through as if we were flipping it inside out again, but just don't pull it all the way. Now that you have that opening back out, you can sew parallel to that opened edge to close it up. You can then use the loop turner to push it back through and either use a pen, a chopstick, or just use the end of the loop turner to push out those corners of the strap so that they sit flat. Then with the other end that is open, you can either overlock this or you can fold the raw edges inside of the strap about 1 centimeter, press it with your iron and then sew a straight stitch parallel to the edge to hide all the raw edges inside. Repeat this for all of the straps. Then just take them back to your iron and iron them so that they're nice and flat. The next step is how we will gather up the dress panel. So find the top of the dress panel and you'll need to adjust your sewing settings from the regular stitch length to the longest stitch length. And then sew along the top edge all the way around, but don't back tack at the beginning or the end. You'll want to make sure you have a bit of excess thread at both ends because we will then go ahead and pull this to create our gathers. I normally just sew one of these gathering stitches, but you can sew two if you are finding that the gathers come loose. Pull the threads together and evenly spread them around the dress, and then we can attach the top to the dress panel. Have your dress panel inside out and then have your top panel the right way around and put the top panel through the dress panel so that the good sides are facing. Align the side seams up and pin in place. Make sure that you're also pinning the front parts together and the back parts together. You can then go and pin around the edges and move the ruffles and gathers around as you like to spread them around evenly. Now set your sewing machine back to the original stitch settings and sew a straight stitch all the way around. I like to sew a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance all the way around here just so that I'm making sure that I'm catching all of those gathered bits. Then once you finish and have secured the top to the bottom, you can go ahead and remove that gathered stitch by just pulling it all the way out. Go and flip the dress to the other way around and make sure that there aren't any loose threads or anything on the outside, and also make sure that you've caught all of those gathers. If you miss any gathers, just take a seam ripper and unpick the stitch from the inside in that section, and then sew back over where you've missed that little bit of a gather, making sure that it's nice and secured inside the dress. Then you can go and overlock the raw edges or zigzag stitch all of those raw edges, and I also overlock the raw edge of the bottom of the dress to prepare for the hem later. Go to the iron and iron the seams flat towards the bottom of the dress and from the inside. Then with the excess thread, we can use a bigger sewing needle and thread it back through the overlocked bits to secure, like what we did earlier on. With our shoulder straps, we can measure out where they'll sit by referring to the guide. So for me, that's 4.5 inches from the center for the front. You can move these over more to the side if you'd like, and if you find that they sit a little bit too far in. Go ahead and pin our front straps to either side. You can also do this when we do the bias tape and have them on the inside of the bias, but I find that it makes moving the bust strap too difficult, so that's why I put them on the outside of the bias. So measure out 4.5 inches from the center front on one side and pin your shoulder strap to the inside of the dress with the seam of the strap facing towards the side seam of the dress. Do this for the other side, and then same thing for the back. Measure 4.5 inches from the side seam though, and then pin your back shoulder straps down with the seams facing away from the side seam. Repeat for the other side, and then when we sew this down, we're going to sew a straight stitch basically where we sewed our bias. So you can see you have that bottom stitch on the bias. You'll sew a straight stitch along that bottom edge of the strap, and then you'll also sew another stitch along that top edge of the strap in line with the stitch that creates the ruffle on the bias. This just hides the stitches a bit more and also still allows for the bust strap to pass through the bias casing we created. Make sure that you have that gap so that it can be adjusted. Repeat for all the straps, and then we're almost done. With your hem, you'll need to fold over and iron down 2 centimeters and pin this in place. Then you can go to your sewing machine and sew your hem. Finally, take the bust strap and a safety pin, put the safety pin through one end of the bust strap and then thread it through the casing. As you're doing this, you'll start to notice that you're creating the ruffles in the top of the dress, and you'll see that this is also how you adjust the dress to fit you. Thread it all the way through to the other side, and once you get to the end, adjust all the ruffles so that the bust strap is evenly spread out, and then you can tie a knot in the end and cut off excess, and then you're finished your Madison dress. So that is the end of this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed. Also, a little tip, if you want to do this as a maxi dress, absolutely go for it. You can just do that by extending the dress panel piece. Just measure how much extra you would like to add to the length. You can do like a mid-calf length or just go straight to ankles. And I think this as a maxi dress would just be super gorgeous. I'm yet to do that for myself, but I think that I might try that next. Maybe I'll do a little mini tutorial on my Instagram in the coming weeks or something like that as well to show you how to do it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I can't wait to see your Madison dresses. Be sure to tag me on Instagram if you have created the Madison dress at sewing_in_May, and I can't wait to see you guys create your very own. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.